I greet you in Jesus' precious name. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to be with you today. I want to speak specifically today to people who are in full-time ministry. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, my wife always asks me the question, what is full-time ministry? I mean, she's my wife. She's the mother of my children. She's the one who heads up the home. She says, I'm in full-time ministry. I said, and you really are. So I have a little bit of a problem sometimes when they say I'm in full-time ministry. We are all in full-time ministry. Joseph of Arimathea, the businessman, was in full-time ministry. Jesus, the carpenter, was in full-time ministry. And I'm not being disrespectful. Okay? And we can go on and on. Peter, the fisherman, was in full-time ministry. So we're talking to everybody. Now, one of my spiritual sons asked me a question. And he said, how did you handle, because he read my story, Faith Like Potatoes, how did you handle it when you came back from Scotland, when you'd been preaching to your father and mother's people for 3 months, not 3 weeks, not 3 days. I went over with my oldest daughter and I traveled Scotland from the north to the south, the east to the west. And I preached my heart out day in, day out, because there was nothing else to do. No sightseeing, just preaching. And when I left the farm, the maize crop that we were growing, seed maize, was in full tassel, 6 to 8 foot tall. When I came back home, it was like this. There was nothing left. It was finished. The whole season had cycled. I'm from the old school. I like to protect my wife. And in those days, we had the old checkbook. You signed a check and took it to the bank and got the money. I had to give my wife the signing authority, signing powers. So she was signing the checks. She was making the decisions. She was taking the children to school, bringing them home, going to the sports days. I had a young man that was living with us, and we were looking after him. I had a beautiful Staffordshire Bull Terrier dog that used to follow me around like a shadow. He would not go with anybody else. When I came home, I sat there and he walked right past me. You're laughing, it's not a joke. And he followed this young man, got into the pickup and went out to the farm. I felt absolutely wretched. Now that's exactly what happened to Elijah. Elijah had just had an incredible victory on Mount Carmel. Fire, nothing less than fire, it came down from heaven, consumed the sacrifice. He then proceeded to kill 450 prophets of the devil himself. The next thing you hear is in the desert in the state of deep depression. You say, how can that be? Well, Mark chapter 8 verse 36 says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his soul? Absolutely nothing. And I'll never forget getting in my pickup one day. I felt totally out of it. You see, life has to go on. Just because you're not at home, everything doesn't just come to a halt. And I went to visit an old evangelist. He was in his 80s. And I went and sat next to him. His name was Gerhard Engelbrecht. He was an old South African German. And he'd been preaching all his life. And I sat down and had a cup of tea. And I broke down. I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I should be so jubilant. I've seen people healed. I've seen people get saved. I've seen families restored. I've seen men coming back to God. And I've come back home. And I'm sitting in a state of absolute depression. What's happened? He just smiled. He never said a word. You see, folks, I want to tell you, if Jesus is not enough in your life, then you're in trouble. First Jesus and then everything else. Otherwise, you'll never make it. God bless you. Goodbye.